She travelled miles to start over as a mail-order bride, heart full of hope. But her wedding night shattered when she heard scratching above the bedroom ceiling and found the first wife staring back at her from the attic shadows. The first thing Clara noticed wasn't the house. It was the silence. She stepped down from the rattling stagecoach with a half-withered bouquet clutched in her fingers and a hope so fragile it barely survived the dusty road. A prairie wind curled around her like a whispered warning, tugging at her skirts, biting at the lace gloves she'd worn to look like a lady. She didn't speak right away. She just stared up at the house. It wasn't grand. 2 stories, weather-worn planks, a leaning porch swing that groaned with each gust of wind, and yet it wasn't the sag of the roof or the greyness of the paint that unsettled her. It was the stillness. The windows blinked like eyes that didn't want to see. The chimney coughed a little smoke, but the door stayed closed, until it didn't. Man stepped out, broad-shouldered, square-jawed, about 10 years older than the daguerreotype he'd sent. "Clara," he said, voice low, almost as if he regretted saying it. "You came." Clara forced a smile. "Of course I did, Mr. Harrow." He didn't smile back, just stepped down to meet her and held out a calloused hand. "Eli." She nodded, taking it. His grip was firm but fleeting. No warmth, no joy, not even relief. He didn't kiss her hand or look her over, the way she'd braced herself for. He didn't say she looked prettier than her picture or ask how the journey was. He just picked up her single bag and muttered, "Let's get you inside before the light fades." Inside. The word felt colder than the air. The house groaned as she stepped over the threshold. The floorboards dipped beneath her boots. The wallpaper peeled in corners. The furniture was simple and clean, but there was a stale kind of hush to it all, as if it had been waiting too long for someone to walk through. She paused. "It's very quiet." Eli turned, jaw ticking. "Don't mind that. Just an old house." She followed him into what must have been the parlour. There was a fire crackling low. The logs hissed like they were unhappy about burning. A tea service waited on the table, untouched, and a rocking chair swayed once, then stilled, as if someone had just stood up from it. "You live alone?" she asked. He hesitated, just a second too long. "Yeah," he said. Then a noise, faint but unmistakable. A soft creak from above, like weight shifting. Wood protesting under footsteps. Clara stiffened. "Is that—" "The attic," he interrupted. "It does that. Wind gets trapped up there." She nodded, uncertain. He showed her to a room. It wasn't what she'd expected. Not the room of a new bride. Not even a guest chamber, really. Just a small space with a bed, a trunk, and a narrow window that looked out over a stretch of brown grass. "I thought—" She swallowed. "Aren't we to be married soon?" Again, that pause. "Tomorrow," he said. But he didn't meet her eyes. That night, she didn't sleep. Not fully. The mattress groaned when she shifted, the air too dry for comfort, and every so often, just as her mind would start to slip toward dreams, there it was again, the creak, above her. The first time, she wrote it off. Settling wood, wind. The second time, she opened her eyes and held her breath. The third, she sat up. It wasn't just steps, it was scratching, like nails on the floorboards. Slow, deliberate. Then, nothing. The silence afterward was worse than the sound. She pulled her shawl around her and crept to the door. The hallway outside was darker than it should have been, the oil lamp at the far end flickering like it was trying to go out. The attic hatch loomed above the stairwell, just a square in the ceiling, with a cord hanging down. Clara stared up, at it. Another scratch. She backed away, heart thudding too loud. She didn't sleep at all after that. At breakfast, she tried to look composed. Eli sat across from her, silent as ever, sipping coffee like the night hadn't made her question everything. She watched him, studied the set of his jaw, the tension in his shoulders. He didn't ask how she'd slept. She asked anyway. Do you hear it, Eli? He didn't look up. Hear what? The sounds. From the attic. This time, he did look at her. And something behind his eyes, something fast and dark, flickered and vanished. It's an old house, he said. That's not an answer. He set the cup down harder than necessary. There's nothing up there. I told you. But he didn't offer to show her. That afternoon, he went out to tend the horses. Clara stood at the foot of the stairs staring up at the attic hatch. The cord swayed gently, even though the air was still. She pulled it. The stairs creaked down slow. The darkness above yawned wide. She stepped up. The air turned cold halfway up, like it belonged to something else entirely. At the top, she paused. Hello? She whispered. A shadow shifted in the corner. She froze. Then, suddenly, a flash of movement, a hand. Pale. Thin. Clutching the edge of an old quilt. Clara gasped and stumbled back. The shape in the corner didn't move. Then a voice, so soft it might have been a memory. He said you'd be prettier. Clara nearly fell down the stairs. She locked the door to her room that night, heart racing too hard to be soothed by reason. The attic stairs had creaked back into place, but the memory of that voice clung to her like frost. Eli didn't mention the attic. He didn't mention her pallor, or the tremble in her hands, or why she flinched when he brushed past her. But that night, he brought her wine, red, bitter. To calm your nerves, he said. She didn't drink it. He left the room without closing the door behind him. Later, she heard the hatch creak again. But it wasn't going up. It was coming down. The door creaked open. Clara held her breath, every muscle rigid beneath the quilt. The air shifted in the room. Cold, old, as if something long buried had stirred. A soft scrape followed, like nails brushing against wood. But nothing entered. No footsteps, no words, just presence. She waited until the silence grew so tight it pressed against her chest. Then, ever so slowly, she sat up. The hallway was empty, but the attic stairs were down again. This time, they hadn't creaked. This time, they descended like they belonged open. Clara slipped from the bed, her bare feet freezing against the wooden floor. She moved quietly, as though afraid her own heartbeat might wake something she didn't want waking. She stood, beneath the attic. "Who are you?" she whispered, a soft breath above. A shape, a small figure, just far enough in the shadows to be missed by the eye but felt by every nerve in her body. "You shouldn't have come here," the voice said. A woman's voice, young, but worn raw by something Clara couldn't place. "He lies, even when he says nothing at all." Clara took a step up. "What's your name?" A pause. Then, "Ruth." Clara's breath caught. "Ruth Harrow." The silence that followed was heavier than confirmation. Eli's first wife. The woman who, by all accounts, had died 3 years ago. A fever, he'd written in his letters. Sudden. Tragic. Buried behind the church where the grass grew wild. But now here, alive, hidden, like a secret the house had been forced to carry. "Why are you here?" Clara whispered. Ruth didn't answer. Instead, she asked, "Did he bring you here to stay?" Clara gripped the banister tighter. "I came to be his wife." A soft, hollow laugh from above. Not bitter, not angry, just empty. "I was his wife," Ruth said, "and then I wasn't." The next morning, Eli acted as if nothing had happened. He brought Clara eggs, burnt at the edges. She picked at them, unable to eat. Her eyes drifted toward the ceiling again and again. "Did you ever love her?" she asked, finally. He didn't look up. "Who?" She waited. He lifted his eyes, sharp now. "Don't start seeing ghosts, Clara. This house has enough of them already." She almost asked what that meant. Almost. But she didn't. Because the way he said it, it wasn't a warning. It was a dare. That day, Clara wrote a letter to her sister back in Illinois. She didn't mention Ruth, didn't mention the attic. Just 3 words. Something's wrong here. She never found out if it was sent. The town was a day's ride. The post was controlled by Eli's cousin, and Clara had no horse. That night, the stairs were up, the attic silent. Clara dreamt of a woman with stringy hair, fingernails cracked and dirty, crouched in the shadows, whispering names that weren't hers anymore. She woke before dawn to the sound of crying. Not loud, not desperate, but low and rhythmic, like someone who had forgotten how to sob properly. Clara rose again. This time, she didn't stop at the stairs. She climbed them. The attic was dim, the only light coming from a slatted window where dust motes danced like nervous spirits. Ruth sat curled beneath the window, knees drawn to her chest, staring at nothing. Clara's breath caught in her throat. Ruth looked at her. "He kept me here." Clara took a step closer. "Why?" Ruth's eyes glistened, not with tears, but something colder. "I stopped being what he needed, so he made room for something new." She gestured vaguely toward the lower floor. "You." Clara's skin prickled. "He told me you died." "I did," Ruth said, her voice brittle. "To him." A pause. "Now he wants a prettier ghost." Clara swallowed. "I'm not here to replace you." Another empty laugh. "You already have." A sound downstairs. Footsteps. Clara turned. Ruth reached out and grabbed her wrist. Her hand was cold, her grip desperate. "Don't trust him." "I already don't," Clara whispered. But when she returned to her room, the door was closed, locked, from the outside. She knocked once, twice. No answer. Then the voice, Eli's, calm, low, behind the door. "It's best if you sleep in there." "Tonight." Clara stepped back. "What is this?" she asked, voice trembling. "A test," he said. "For both of us." His footsteps receded. The next hours bled slowly. Clara paced. She tested the window. It opened barely. She tried the door, again, and when sleep finally came, it was restless and sharp-edged. In the morning, the door was open. Breakfast was set on the table. Eli was gone. She didn't eat. She climbed the attic again, but Ruth wasn't there. In her place, a note torn from the back of a book, scribbled in jagged handwriting. "He's done this before." There were others. Clara turned cold. Her pulse thundered in her ears. How many? That afternoon, she found the locked cabinet in the cellar. It was behind a wall of wood that didn't match the rest. New planks nailed over old. She pried them, back with a fire iron. Inside, letters, dozens, all from women, all addressed to Eli Harrow. They were dated over a span of 7 years, mail-order brides. Like her, she read one, then another, and then another. Each one ended the same way. "I hope to meet you soon. I hope I am enough." They never wrote back. She confronted him that evening. She didn't plan to, but the words came out like blood from a wound. "I found the letters." He froze, standing over the fireplace. "What letters?" "You know which." He didn't turn. "You went into the cellar. I went where you locked your past." A long silence. Then finally he turned to face her, and his eyes weren't cold anymore. They were empty. "There's no law against heartbreak," he said. "There is against murder." He smiled. Just a little. Not a warm smile. The kind of smile you see on a man just before he pulls the trigger. "Don't say things you don't understand, Clara." She backed away. "Where are they, Eli? The other women?" Another step. Another. He took a slow breath. "They left," he said. "No, they didn't." He reached behind the mantel and pulled out a ring box. He opened it. Inside, 3 rings, all tarnished, all different. All wives, he said softly. All mistakes. Clara's voice broke. Where's Ruth? He paused. Then, so casually it made her stomach turn, he said, Dead. I saw her. No, you didn't. I spoke to her. No, he said again, gently now. You wanted to. So you did. That's how this house works. You bring your ghosts with you. Clara's hands trembled. I'm not like them, she whispered. He nodded. Not yet. Then, before she could move, he stepped past her, out the door, into the night. Clara stood alone in the flickering candlelight. Somewhere above her, the attic stairs creaked again, but this time she didn't. Go up! She bolted the door and listened, because this time the voice didn't whisper. It screamed. Clara didn't sleep that night. She sat at the edge of the bed, eyes on the window where the candle guttered and cast a trembling glow. The scream hadn't come again. No footsteps overhead. No whispered voices from the attic. Just silence, dense and aching. But silence was never safe in that house. It was the kind that waited for your mind to crack open. At dawn, she crept downstairs. The air was still, heavy. Dust floated in the amber light like something sacred had been disturbed. She passed the kitchen, ignoring the untouched breakfast Eli had set out, and descended again into the cellar. This time, she brought the fire iron with her. The broken planks she'd torn away the day before hung like snapped ribs in the wall. She pushed deeper into the dark, letting her hands skim along the cold stone. There was something behind the far shelf, an unevenness in the wall. She moved the jars and boards aside, revealing a second door. Half-rotted wood, rusted hinges, no handle. She didn't hesitate. She raised the iron and struck. The wood splintered, once, twice, 3 times, and the door groaned open on its own. The stench rolled out first. Rot. Mold. Something else, like something sweet, that had decayed so long it forgot what it once was. Clara covered her mouth and stepped inside. It was a root cellar, at least it had been. Now, it was something else entirely. Dresses hung from nails along the far wall. Yellowed lace, torn cotton. A shawl, stiff with age. Beneath them, shoes, scattered like the women had been running when they vanished. A pair of spectacles, cracked, in half. A ribbon. A diary with pages soaked in what looked like dried tea until she smelled it. And then the photographs. Clara knelt beside the small chest tucked behind the dresses. Inside, old tintypes curling at the edges from heat or time or both. Women, all different, all posed in the same parlor chair she now recognized as the one in her room. Some of them were smiling. Most weren't. She counted them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 10. 10 brides, all before her, all gone. Her hands trembled as she set the last one down, a woman with dark eyes and a long scar across her cheek. She wore the same wedding ring Clara had seen in Eli's box. Clara staggered back. A sound behind her. A soft thump. She spun around. No one. But the cellar door had swung shut. She climbed. The stairs 2 at a time. It was locked. Of course it was. Panic clawed its way into her throat. She pounded against the wood. Eli! No answer. She screamed until her voice cracked, then sat down on the steps and waited. Minutes passed, then hours. The candle burned low, and just as the flame began to die, the door creaked open on its own. Eli stood there, expression blank. I told you not to dig, he said. Clara stood slowly, the fire irons still in her hand. What happened to them? He looked at her for a long moment, then said simply, They were ungrateful. Did you kill them? He didn't flinch. What would you do if I said yes? She gripped the iron tighter. His gaze dropped to it. You'd try. I'll give you that. She didn't strike. Not yet. Instead, she said, Ruth's alive. No. I spoke to her. You spoke to what's left of her. He stepped forward. Clara didn't move. I gave her everything. This house, a name, safety, and she wanted more. They always want more. Clara swallowed hard. So you locked her away? She locked herself away. That's the difference. He moved past her, down into the cellar, as if nothing mattered. She followed. He went straight to the trunk of photos, stared at them like they were old friends. I thought you'd be different, he said. I am. No. You're already looking for ways out. She didn't answer, because he wasn't wrong. I'm not going to stop you, he said, turning back toward her. If you want to run, run. But I won't chase you, because you know I won't. Get far? No, he said, because this house always brings them back. She stared at him. He smiled. You think you're the first one to climb into town, screaming about ghosts and murder. I've buried more reputations than bodies, Clara. She didn't sleep that night either. She packed a small bag, letters, one dress, the diary from the cellar. And when Eli rode into town the next morning to check the mail, she waited only long enough to see his shape disappear down the ridge. Then she fled. The house stood quiet behind her, watching. She didn't look back. She walked for 2 hours through rough brush and stony hills, too afraid to take the trail. She drank from a shallow creek, hands shaking. She thought she heard a horse behind her once, but it was only wind. By dusk, she reached the outskirts of town, and it was there she saw her. Ruth, standing beneath a broken signpost, barefoot, clothes threadbare. Clara ran to her. You got out. But Ruth only looked. At her, eyes glassy. I never left, she said. What? Clara's breath caught. Ruth touched her chest. He doesn't let us leave. Not really. Clara shook her head. You're here now. We're in town. People will help. No, Ruth said softly. Look again. Clara turned. There was no town, just the ridge, just the house, standing where it had always stood. Clara staggered back. No, I walked for hours. You thought you did. Ruth's voice trembled. He keeps us in loops. The house. It listens. It learns. You run. It gives you hope. You scream. It gives you silence. It feeds off what you fear most. Clara's knees buckled. She fell hard onto the dirt. Ruth knelt beside her. You asked if I was alive. Clara looked up. I'm not. Then Ruth vanished. Not like a ghost. Not like smoke. She simply ceased to be. And Clara sat alone in the dirt, the sky growing darker, the wind colder. She stood eventually and walked back to the house, because there was nowhere else to go. The front door was open. The fire was lit. Eli sat at the table, smiling. You made the right choice, he said. Clara didn't sit. I'm not staying, she whispered. His smile deepened. You already have. That night, she lay in bed fully dressed, the diary gripped in her hands. She turned to the last page. The final entry was just 4 words. The house chose him. A sound at the attic. Then, a voice. He wasn't always this way. Ruth again, or what was left of her. Clara didn't move. She just whispered, Tell me everything. The sound came again in the night. Not a scream this time, not something sharp or sudden or easy to explain. It was a dragging, slow, deliberate, like someone pulling their fingernails across the floorboards overhead, one at a time. Clara stayed, still. The diary clutched to her chest felt heavier than the house itself. She hadn't slept, not really. She couldn't. Not since Ruth had vanished from the earth like she'd never been born. Since the town had crumbled into nothing. Since Eli's face began to look less like a man and more like something borrowed from memory. She rose just before dawn, Her legs ached from tension, and her head throbbed with the weight of unshed panic. She didn't light a lamp. She didn't need one. Somehow, the house always lit itself for her. Flickers of candlelight in rooms she hadn't entered, fires glowing, in hearths she never fed. The hallway outside her room was lit with a long row of low flames along the sconces, like the house was preparing her for something ceremonial. She stepped past Eli's door. It was closed. Always closed. At the top of the stairs, the attic door hung slightly open, not wide, just enough to let a sliver of cold air and the scent of lavender and rot seep down to her. She climbed, slowly. Every step felt like a betrayal of her own instincts. At the top, she paused and pushed the door open. The attic wasn't empty. It wasn't dusty or abandoned like she'd expected. It was preserved, like someone had been living there all along. A small bed rested under the gable window, its sheets smoothed and folded with care. A wardrobe stood cracked open, revealing clothes Clara recognized. Not from Ruth's trunk, but from the tintypes in the chest below. A comb rested on a dresser beside a broken mirror. Someone had scrawled names on the wood in uneven script. Martha, Delia, Anne, Ruth, Clara. The last name had been added recently, still damp. She backed away, but then came the whisper. You're not like the others. It wasn't Ruth. It wasn't a woman's voice at all. Eli stood in the corner of the attic, his frame half shadowed by a beam. He hadn't followed her up. He'd been there all along. Clara gripped the fire iron. He didn't move toward her. He only smiled, like he was proud. You climbed higher than any of them, he said. Her voice cracked. Why are their names here? This house keeps them, not me. What does that mean? Eli walked forward. I didn't build this place. I found it. Long before the war, before I was anyone. I was running, desperate, starving. I saw a light in the hills and I followed it. And when I got here, this house opened for me, just like it opened for you. She shook her head, stepping backward until her back hit the far wall. You brought those women here. You chose them. No, he said softly. It did. She looked around, heart pounding so hard she thought it might knock the roof down. You're insane. Maybe, he admitted. But I've been here too long to care. She pointed the fire iron at him. Let me go. I told. You already, he said. I won't stop you, but she will. Who? The house. The window slammed shut behind her. Clara jumped. Eli didn't even blink. I buried the first one with my own hands, he said. She tried to burn it down. Woke up one night with her fingernails peeled back and blood in her throat. She made it to the porch. That's as far as anyone ever makes it. Why me? Clara whispered. Why not just let me die like the others? He stepped closer. Because you're not running. You're listening. She turned and ran. Down the stairs, through the corridor, back to her room. She slammed the door and braced it with the dresser. She grabbed the diary again, turning to the page after the last entry. There was a new one. Fresh ink. Written in her own handwriting. He's telling the truth. The house chooses, but not who you think. Clara stumbled back. The fire iron slipped from her grip and clattered to the floor. She didn't remember writing it. She would never write that, would she? Night passed slowly. Time bent around the house like glass in heat. In the morning, she tried the front door again. It opened, and beyond it, town. Real town. Horses, people, dust in the street. Clara stood there, stunned. Eli stepped up behind her. You can go. She looked at him, uncertain. Why now? He didn't smile. Because it's ready. For what? He didn't answer. She fled. Down the path, into town, past the saloon, the chapel, the post office. Faces turned. Women stared. One man tipped his hat in that slow, sorrowful way men do when they think they're about to attend a funeral. Clara burst into the sheriff's office. Sheriff Harlan Gage sat at his desk, chewing the end of a pencil. He looked up, startled. "Miss, there's a man up there," she said. "He's killed people, buried them. 10 women, maybe more." The sheriff stood slowly. She went on, gasping. "His name is Eli Mercer." Sheriff Gage's expression didn't change. Then, he sat back down. Clara blinked. "Did you hear me?" "We've heard it before." She froze. "How many?" "You're the 4th to come running down here screaming about Eli Mercer. That house up there's been the center of bad stories since before my time. Then why haven't you?" "We tried. God is my witness, we tried." Deputies went up. One came back, shot himself 2 weeks later. Said the walls whispered to him. Said the air wouldn't let him breathe. "You're just going to let it go on?" Sheriff Gage looked tired. "We've got 1 jail cell and 23 people in this town I can protect. I can't fight something that don't bleed." Clara left, disgusted. Outside, the town seemed different now, off-kilter. Shadows leaned in the wrong directions. Noises echoed strangely. And the people, all of them, stared at her like she was already half a ghost. She tried to rent a horse. None were available. She tried to send a telegram. The operator's eyes glazed over like he was listening to water, drip from a ceiling only he could see. She was trapped, just in a different kind of cage. That night, she returned to the house. She told herself it was to confront him, to burn it down, to find Ruth and bury her properly. But truth was, the house had already called her back. Eli was waiting on the porch. He didn't gloat, didn't speak, just opened the door and stepped aside. She entered. This time, it was different. The air was warmer. The hallway lit more brightly. A welcome home. She stepped inside her room and saw the painting. It hadn't been there before. A portrait hung above the bed. Of her. Not how she was, but how she would be. Hollow eyes, pale skin, a faint, crooked smile. And behind her, the attic door opened just a crack. The candle flickered out, and a voice behind her said, "You're almost ready." Clara didn't scream. She didn't whirl around. Whatever voice had spoken those words, it wasn't Eli's. It wasn't even quite human. It had a wetness to it, a resonance that seemed to rattle in her ribs more than echo in her ears. Her spine went rigid. The candlelight was gone now, and yet the house was not dark. A pale silver glow bled through the cracks in the walls, the floors, even the seams of the mirror frame. She reached out to steady herself, and her fingers brushed the edge of the painted portrait. It was warm, almost pulsing. She turned. Eli wasn't in the doorway anymore. The hallway beyond was empty, but the house was not. She could feel it, like breath on her neck, like the low murmur of a conversation taking place in the walls. She took a slow step backward toward the dresser, hands groping for the iron poker she'd hidden there 2 nights ago. It wasn't there. In its place sat a ribbon, blue, childlike, tied into a bow. She hadn't brought it. She hadn't seen it before, but her hands trembled as they reached for it, because it felt like something important, something she ought to remember. Her fingers brushed the silk. A sound cracked overhead. A thud. Not sharp, not sudden. More like a body collapsing onto old floorboards. Clara's knees nearly gave out beneath her. She ran from the room, ignoring the picture, the ribbon, the whispers in the walls. Back up the stairs, to the attic, to where everything had begun to twist. The door at the top stood open again, same as before. But this time, there was no warm candlelight, no sense of welcome. It was cold, unrelenting. Like winter had built a home beneath the rafters. She stepped inside. The bed had been stripped, the mirror cracked wider. Names still scrawled along the wood, but hers had been underlined now, not once, but twice. The wardrobe gaped open, empty. Only one thing remained, a cradle. Not large enough for a baby, too small for anything human, and, inside it, nestled in torn lace and withered flowers, was a wedding ring. Clara's breath caught. She knew that ring, not from her own finger, but from a photograph. The daguerreotype she'd found in Ruth's trunk. The same dull shine, the same curve of metal bent ever so slightly inward. Clara reached for it, and the cradle snapped shut like a jaw. She fell backward, hard. Her elbow slammed against the floor, and pain shot through her arm. But the cradle stayed shut, locked tight, like it had never meant to offer her anything at all, just the illusion of choice. The attic door groaned behind her. She turned. Eli stood there, face unreadable. "You should have stayed in town," he said softly. Clara pushed herself up. "You knew what I'd find," he nodded. "You were never meant to stay long." Then what was the point? Why bring me here? Why any of them? Eli stepped into the room. He didn't speak right away. He moved toward the cradle and opened it with one hand. Inside, the ring was gone. "Not all of them were brought," he said finally. "Some came on their own." She stared. "Are you saying they chose this?" "I'm saying they were already lost before they crossed the porch." Clara's voice rose. "You don't get to turn murder into mercy." He looked at her with something close to pity. "You still think I'm in control." That shut her up. He walked to the window and stared out. "You ever notice how it never rains here? How the wind never really reaches the eaves?" She didn't answer. He turned back to her. "Because this house isn't a place. It's a hunger." She wanted to deny it. She wanted to laugh. But deep down, beneath the rage and confusion, a seed of understanding had taken root. The way time felt wrong here. The way the world outside warped to match the house's moods. The way everyone in town spoke of it like a storm they'd already accepted would one day take them. "I've tried to burn it down," Eli said. "Tried to collapse it with dynamite. It rebuilds. Always. Sometimes worse than before." Clara whispered. "Then why stay?" He didn't blink. "Because I owe it something." A cold laugh escaped her lips. "Owe it?" "She saved me. The house. During the war. I was left for dead in a trench of mud and blood and fire. I should have died. But I crawled into an old church. Same bones as this place. Same silence. It healed me, fed me. And when I came west, she followed, grew." "You talk like it's alive." Eli met her eyes. "It is, but not like you think. What does it want? You, me, all of us. Not to kill, not exactly. To remember, to stay." Clara backed away, breath shaking. "I won't stay." That's what they all said. She fled again. Through the attic door, down the stairs, out the front door, only to find that the sun had stopped rising. The world outside was grey, not dim, not night, just stuck, timeless. As if the house had paused the sky. She tried to run, but the path stretched wrong beneath her feet. The town, visible before, now seemed like a painting in the distance, flat and unreachable. She turned back and saw the house had changed. It was taller, narrower, windows where none had been. Doors now sealed shut. It had shed its disguise. Clara fell to her knees, dizzy. The ribbon was still in her hand, clenched so tightly it had cut into her skin. She opened her fingers. Blood streaked the silk, but beneath it, etched faintly into the weave, were initials. D.W. Delia Wren, another name from the diary. Clara stood. She didn't run this time. She went back inside. The house breathed her in. Each room now pulsed like an organ. The wallpaper throbbed. The floor beneath her feet ticked like a clock. She followed the pulse. Back to the parlour, where the piano played itself. Each keystroke struck her like a whisper. She remembers. She remembers. She remembers. The piano bench creaked. A figure sat there now. Not Ruth. Not Eli. A woman with hair like coal dust and a jaw too sharp for her face. Her eyes were wrong, too wide, too pale, like peeled onions. She turned her head. "You climb too high," she said. Clara froze. "Who are you?" The woman smiled. "I was first." She stood, her bones cracked. Her spine arched backward too far, then righted itself with a jolt. "I kept the house quiet for years, fed it stories, blood, things I didn't need anymore, but it wanted more, always more. You let it take them? I warned them. No one listens after vows are spoken." "You're dead," Clara whispered. "You're not real." The woman grinned wider. "Then why are you listening?" Behind her, the house began to swell, like a beast stretching after a long nap. Clara staggered backward. A hand caught hers. Eli. He looked terrified. "She's breaking through again," he said. "Who is she?" He didn't answer. The floor split. Wood gave way, and Clara fell. Down, down. Through darkness and memory and dreams she never had. She hit the ground hard and opened her eyes in her room. The portrait was gone. The diary was on the floor, open too. A page she hadn't seen, a final name, freshly inked, Clara Wren Mercer. She screamed, and the house sighed. The scream didn't echo. It got swallowed whole. Clara clamped a hand over her mouth, her breath catching like a fishhook in her chest. The diary lay open on the floor, her name scrawled in ink that hadn't yet dried. She backed away from it, her heart hammering hard enough she thought the house might hear it too, but she didn't dare look away from the page. Not yet. The lettering wasn't hers. It wasn't Eli's. The slant was too elegant, the penstroke too sure, too old-fashioned. It looked like it belonged to a woman who never made mistakes. She crouched, reaching with trembling fingers. Her hand hovered just above the page. Something about touching it felt wrong, like grabbing hold of lightning. Still, she had to know. She brushed the name, and the ink bled. It spread like rot through the fibers, curling outward in long, spidery veins until the paper turned dark. She recoiled, but the diary didn't burn or vanish. It just changed. The letters rearranged, and then it began to write again. Slowly, deliberately, forming a new line beneath her name. She stayed. "No," Clara whispered. "I didn't. I haven't. I won't." But even as she said it, something inside her buckled. Her knees hit the floor. Her mouth tasted like metal. The walls groaned again, louder this time, and the air smelled like rosewater and dirt. Buried. Things. She turned her face to the ceiling, trying to keep her thoughts from scattering like birds. And then she heard Ruth. Not a memory. Not a trick of the house. Actual footsteps creaked down the hall. Clara rushed to the door. "Ruth," she cried out. But what she saw in the hallway stopped her cold. It wasn't Ruth. It was a girl, maybe 14, dressed in a white nightgown that ended just above her bare, muddy feet. Her hair was matted, her eyes sunken, and her hands were raw, as if she'd spent hours clawing at something that wouldn't let her go. The girl stared at her, lips parted. "You shouldn't be here," she said. Clara felt herself inching backward. "Neither should you." The girl blinked. "They don't let us leave." "Who's they?" But the girl didn't answer. She looked past Clara now, into the room, her gaze hardening. "They've already started." Clara turned just in time to see the diary ignite in a blaze of pale blue flame. "No!" She lunged, trying to smother the fire with her hands, but it didn't burn her. It simply vanished, taking the book with it, nothing left but ash, and that awful smell, rosewater and rot. When she looked back to the hallway, the girl was gone. She ran after her anyway. Through the crooked halls, past the parlour where the piano still played in minor chords, down into the cellar where Ruth had once sworn she'd hidden something the house couldn't touch. Clara didn't know if it was instinct or desperation, but she needed to go deeper now, into the marrow of this place. The cellar door was ajar, A thread of white linen had been tied to the handle. She stepped through, down stone steps slick with condensation, her breath misting now, as if she'd walked into winter. The light here was wrong, neither dark nor lit, just washed out, like the color had been drained from the air. Shelves lined the walls, but not with food or jars. With bones, dozens, maybe hundreds, some small as birds, others still with scraps of fabric clinging to them. Clara gagged. One step further, and she found a trunk in the corner. It was unlocked. She lifted the lid. Inside were wedding dresses. So many wedding dresses. All stained. Some torn. One still had a veil curled like a spiderweb around the lace. Folded on top was a letter. She picked it up. No envelope, no seal. Just a name across the top in ink that sent a chill through her spine. Delia Wren. Clara unfolded it. If you are reading this, then you were never meant to leave. We all think we're the exception. That love is enough. That goodness protects. But this place isn't about love. It isn't even about punishment. It is about remembrance. It wants to keep us so the world forgets. And it wants the world to forget so it can keep us. I have tried to make peace with that. But if you are still alive, you must run. Not away. Inward. To the heart. To the hearth. Burn what it treasures. Or be treasured yourself. Clara let the letter fall. She now understood what Eli meant when he said he wasn't in control. The house didn't obey. It ruled, but it could still be wounded. She grabbed the dresses, the veil, the letter, and the ash from the diary, stuffed them into a burlap sack she found nearby, and raced back up the stairs. Every window she passed showed something new. A forest that hadn't been there, snow falling on red fields, crows circling skies that burned. The house was shifting again, but she didn't stop. She followed the scent of ash and memory. Back, to the hearth, to the main fireplace in the parlour, where no flame had burned since her arrival. Until now. A blue fire danced in the stone mouth. Waiting. She emptied the sack into it. The flames screamed. Not loudly, not in her ears, in her blood. She dropped to her knees, clutching her head, tears streaming as the walls buckled. The portraits melted. The wallpaper peeled in great curls. A scream rose, not hers, and shook the rafters. And from the upstairs, landing, came the sound of footsteps. Heavy ones. Not the girl. Not Ruth. Eli. He stood at the top of the stairs, clutching something to his chest. A mirror. The same mirror from the attic, now cracked straight through. You should have let it lie, he said, his voice brittle. It was never going to let me go, she said. It might have. You know it wouldn't have. Eli descended slowly. Each step he took left soot. Behind. His eyes were hollow. I tried to warn you. No, Clara said. You tried to groom me into giving in. Like you did. I didn't give in. She stood. You did. Long ago. He stopped at the final step. Then what are you going to do now, Clara Wren Mercer? She stepped toward him, one pace at a time, until they stood only a foot apart. End it, she said, and she took the poker from the hearth, not to strike him, but to shatter the mirror. Eli screamed, not in pain, but as if losing a part of himself, and the house bellowed in unison. The mirror exploded, glass rained down. And in that instant, the floor beneath them gave way, not physically, spiritually. Clara saw them, all of them, the brides, the girls, the children. Their stories rose like smoke, like sighs, curling into the firelight. Some turned to her, some wept, some simply faded. But one reached out. Delia. She didn't speak. She just touched Clara's arm. And for the first time, Clara didn't flinch, because now she understood. The house didn't just feed on grief. It fed on forgotten women. On the ones who never had a name that stayed in someone's mouth long enough to matter. Clara whispered, "I remember you." Delia smiled. The fire roared, and then everything went quiet, utterly still. Clara stood alone in the parlour. The walls no longer pulsed. The windows showed the sun, rising for the first time in days. The floorboards beneath her feet were solid, unmoving, and the diary lay on the mantel, restored. She opened it. The names were still there, but now each had a line beneath them. One word, free, all but one, hers. She closed the book, and for the first time since arriving, she felt no fear, only choice. Clara stood with the book in her hands, the embers of the fire cooling behind her, the blue flame gone, replaced by a quiet warmth that didn't crawl under her skin the way it used to. She hadn't realized how long it had been since she felt warmth without fear. The hearth flickered with soft orange light now, like something ordinary, normal. As if the house had decided, for the first time in its long haunted life, to stop pretending. She glanced down at the diary. So many names, so many stories burned, down to a single word, free. But hers, Clara Wren Mercer, remained untouched. A name with no closure. She was still here, not claimed, not consumed, not devoured by the rot that had taken so many others, but not free, not yet. The air in the parlour shifted. It wasn't cold, but the stillness reminded her of the pause between thunder and lightning, the hush before something inevitable. The mirror was gone. Eli was gone. The hallway where the girl in the nightgown had stood now looked like any other hallway in any other house. But Clara knew better. She pressed her palm to the diary's cover. "I'm not staying," she whispered, and the fire did not reply. She crossed the parlour, stepping over the shattered glass that once held Eli's twisted reflection, and opened the front door. The porch looked different. It was still the same dusty wooden boards and long dead potted plants, but now it stretched toward a road, an actual road. One she hadn't seen since arriving. There had been no road before, only fog and trees and a long walk into nothing. But now, it was there. Her suitcase sat by the step, as if waiting. She didn't remember leaving it there, hadn't touched it since she arrived. But there it was, not dusty, not weather-worn, just as she'd packed it, as if the house was offering her a way out. Her fingers closed around the handle and lifted it. No resistance. That should have comforted her. But something wasn't right. The moment she stepped off the porch, the wind changed, soft but sharp, like breath against the back of her neck. She turned. Ruth stood in the doorway. Her face was pale, streaked with something darker than shadow, and her eyes were unreadable. "I didn't think you'd go," Ruth said. Clara stared, too stunned to speak. "You were so close," Ruth added, "closer than any of the others." "Others? You've seen their names," Clara nodded. "They're free now." Ruth gave a sad smile. "Are they?" A chill passed through Clara's chest. "I burned the dresses. I destroyed the mirror." "You burned their bindings," Ruth said. "But you never saw the root." "What root?" Ruth stepped forward, barefoot on the wood. "The house doesn't keep souls. It keeps echoes, fragments, just enough to keep the pain fed. The real parts, the living parts, those stay here." Her hand tapped her chest. "In the ones who leave, or think they do." Clara felt her stomach tighten. "Then there is no way out." "There is," Ruth said, "but it isn't through the door." Clara looked down the road. The suitcase in her hand now felt heavier, not physically, but spiritually, as if it had filled with all the things she'd refused to face. "If I walk that road," Clara said, slowly, "what happens?" "You forget," Ruth replied. "Everything." Ruth nodded. "You forget the names. You forget the stories. You forget yourself. The suitcase hit the porch with a soft thump, and Clara knew. She couldn't carry them all and walk away pretending she'd never seen them. The girls, the women, the wives. Not again. She stepped back into the house. Ruth didn't move. She just stood, silent and steady, a pillar of the past. "What do I do?" Clara asked. "You remember," Ruth said. "You write it down. Not just names, stories. Start with your own." Clara blinked. "But I don't know the ending." "You will," Ruth said. "As soon as you choose one." She handed Clara something. A quill. Not a pen, not a pencil. A feather dipped in time. The diary reappeared on the mantel, waiting. Clara stepped toward it, opened it, and beneath her name she wrote, "Clara Wren, Mercer stayed. Clara Wren, Mercer remembered. Clara Wren." Mercer opened the door. The ink didn't bleed this time. It glowed, a faint shimmer of gold before it settled into the page like it had always been there. She turned the page and wrote the name of the girl in the nightgown. Elsie. She warned me. She wanted out. I want her remembered. The names came faster now. Delia, Mercy, Hannah, Sable. Names she hadn't known she'd known. Names from whispers and half-seen faces. Names etched into her heart the way the house had etched itself into her bones. And with each name, the house softened. The walls breathed easier. The rot in the corners faded, until she came to one final name. Ruth. She paused, then wrote, "She stayed so we could leave." Ruth stood by the window now, her form less solid, as if each word Clara wrote pulled her further into peace. But she smiled, and that smile wasn't sad anymore. It was grateful. "You did it," she said. "No," Clara whispered. "You all did." A wind moved through the room, not violent, not angry, just wind, fresh and light and new. When Clara stepped out the front door again, the world had changed. The road was still there, but so was the town, distant, but real. She could see the spire of the church, the edges of roofs, smoke rising from chimneys. Life, not a trick of the house, not a bated breath, actual life. She walked. The house didn't follow. It didn't vanish. It simply watched. And when she looked back, it was smaller than she remembered, not looming, not monstrous, just old, just tired, and finally quiet. Months passed. Clara rented a room above the general store in a town whose name she still couldn't pronounce. She worked in the mornings. She wrote in the afternoons. Every page filled with stories the world had forgotten. Every word chipped away at a silence she no longer allowed. One day, she got a letter. No return address. Just a scrap of paper with 2 words. She's free. No name. But Clara knew. She walked to the window and stared out at the horizon. The air smelled of cinnamon and snow. Winter was coming. But she didn't feel cold. Not anymore. She sat down and opened her diary again. This time, she turned to the final page and wrote, "To the ones they tried to forget, I see you, I carry you, and I will never shut the door." The ink dried instantly, and for the first time, her name glowed like the rest. Clara Wren Mercer, free.